Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
He didn't wake up when she loved him the hardest. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Not when she stayed up replying to his dry messages like they still meant something. Not when she kept trying to understand moods he wouldn't explain. Not when she swallowed her pride and reached out first. Not even when she almost broke herself trying to make the connection feel emotionally safe enough for him to stay inside of it. No. Something shifted in him the moment she stopped wanting him the way she used to. And it wasn't immediate. That's what makes it ugly. At first, he mistook her silence for peace. He told himself things like, maybe this is healthier. Maybe we both needed distance. Maybe it wasn't that deep. But then strange things started happening. He'd unlock his phone without thinking and search for her name before realizing what he was doing. He'd hear a joke she would have laughed at and feel this weird hollow pause afterward. He started remembering tiny things that didn't seem important at the time. The way she rubbed her hands together when anxious. The way she went quiet right before giving up emotionally. The last time she looked at him and didn't ask for reassurance anymore. That one stayed with him. Because when a woman truly stops wanting you, the energy changes in a way your body notices before your mind does. And suddenly the attention you once felt suffocated by becomes the silence you can't sleep through. Not because he's evil. Not because she's perfect. But because some people only understand the emotional weight of love after it stops reaching for them. And honestly, I think part of him thought she'd always be there, even while pulling away, even while acting confused, even while saying he needed space. Especially then. At first, he noticed everything. That's what makes this harder to admit honestly. In the beginning, he paid attention to the smallest things about her like they carried actual emotional weight. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. The way she paused before answering vulnerable questions, like she was checking whether honesty was emotionally safe first. The fact that she always sent a second message if the first one sounded too serious. Sorry, that sounded intense, lol. He used to stare at those little follow-up texts longer than he should have. Because secretly, they affected him. Not in the loud cinematic way people describe online. Not in some immediate, I've found my person kind of clarity. It was quieter than that. More physical. He'd feel calmer after talking to her. Less restless. Less mentally scattered. Which honestly confused him more than excitement would have. Because men like him, emotionally avoidant men, although he hated that word when people used it too casually, often know how to survive attraction, lust, chemistry, surface connection. But emotional safety, that's different. Emotional safety can feel strangely exposing when you're not used to it. And she had this habit of seeing through him without making a performance out of it. That's what got him. Not her beauty. Not even the intensity. It was the way she'd noticed something was wrong before he fully understood it himself. You disappear a little today. Not accusatory. Not dramatic. Just observant. And instead of feeling comforted by that, sometimes he felt trapped by it. Which sounds horrible to say out loud. Because she wasn't controlling him. She wasn't demanding constant reassurance. Most of the time, she was actually very patient. But when someone consistently notices your emotional shifts, you lose the ability to fully hide inside yourself. And he had spent most of his life doing exactly that. So, part of him leaned closer to her, and another part immediately started calculating escape routes emotionally. That contradiction exhausted him quietly. There were nights he'd lie in bed replaying conversations with her while simultaneously telling himself not to get too attached. as if attachment was something you can negotiate with intellectually once your body already felt involved. One night she fell asleep on the phone with him accidentally. Nothing dramatic happened. She was just talking about her day and slowly got quieter until her words started blurring together. He remembers staring at the ceiling afterward, listening to her breathing through the speaker, and something inside him softened in a way that genuinely scared him. Not because it was unhealthy, because it felt real. That's the part people misunderstand about emotional avoidance sometimes. It's not always a lack of feeling. Sometimes it's too much feeling colliding with a lifelong habit of emotional self-protection. The next morning, he became weirdly distant. Not intentionally cruel, just off. His replies got shorter. He took longer to answer. He suddenly felt irritated by things that normally wouldn't bother him. She noticed immediately. Of course she did. "You okay?" And instead of telling the truth, that closeness had stirred up emotions he didn't know how to comfortably hold. He blamed work stress. That became a pattern. Intimacy, then distance, closeness, then withdrawal. Like his nervous system only knew how to tolerate emotional connection in temporary doses before sounding some invisible internal alarm. The sad part is that he often hated himself while doing it. People imagine emotionally unavailable men walking around cold and unaffected all the time. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're sitting alone in their apartment staring at a message for 40 minutes because they want closeness and resent needing it simultaneously. He'd miss her while actively creating distance from her. That contradiction became his entire emotional life for a while, and she tried to understand him. God, she tried. Probably longer than she should have. There were moments she almost reached him too. One night she asked him quietly, "Why do you disappear emotionally after we get close?" He laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, because his body reacted before his honesty did. That nervous little laugh people do when they accidentally feel emotionally exposed. "I don't disappear." "You do." "No, I don't." "You kind of do." And the frustrating thing was, part of him knew she was right while he was denying it. So instead of admitting anything vulnerable, he reached for technicalities. "I'm just busy sometimes. I need space occasionally. It's not personal." That phrase, "it's not personal," he used it a lot, as if emotional withdrawal magically hurts less when you phrase it calmly. She got quiet after that conversation. Not angry quiet. Worse, disappointed quiet. And he felt it immediately in his chest. That heavy sinking feeling people get when they realize they've emotionally failed someone in real time, but still don't fully know how to stop themselves. So naturally, he tried to repair the tension without actually becoming emotionally transparent. That's another thing avoidant people do constantly. They restore connection indirectly. Memes, humor, physical affection, casual conversation, sex, anything except direct emotional honesty. And sometimes it worked temporarily. They'd laugh again, reconnect again, have moments that genuinely felt beautiful and easy, which made everything more confusing. Because if the connection was so meaningful, why did he keep pulling away from it? He asked himself that privately more than once, usually late at night, usually after she fell asleep. There was one specific memory he kept replaying later after everything changed. They were sitting in his car outside her apartment. It was late. The windows had started fogging slightly from the cold outside. She was talking about something small. Honestly, he doesn't even remember what anymore. But he remembers watching her hands move while she spoke. And suddenly, he had this overwhelming instinct to kiss her and leave at the exact same time. That's the best way to describe what intimacy felt like for him sometimes. Simultaneous hunger and panic. Part of him wanted to move closer emotionally. Another part wanted immediate escape before the feelings became too real to control. So instead of staying emotionally present in the moment, he made some stupid joke, deflected, shifted the energy, pretended he was tired. He still remembers the micro-expression on her face afterward. Not devastation, just subtle hurt. Like someone emotionally adjusting expectations in real time. Those tiny moments matter more than people think. Relationships rarely collapse from one giant event alone. Sometimes they erode through repeated moments where vulnerability reaches outward and finds hesitation instead of safety. The worst part is that he genuinely cared about her. That's what makes these situations emotionally complicated. Because caring is not always the same thing as emotional capacity. And nobody wants to admit that. Especially men. Especially men who were taught that needing people makes you weak, while simultaneously craving intimacy so badly it leaks out sideways. So he developed emotional habits that looked calm externally, but were internally chaotic. Checking her messages instantly, but waiting 30 minutes to reply. Missing her while pretending to enjoy the distance. Wanting reassurance, but feeling smothered once he received too much of it. At one point, she stopped asking for things directly because she sensed how uncomfortable emotional pressure made him. And weirdly, that hurt him too. Because now he could feel her adapting to his limitations emotionally. You could hear it in her tone sometimes. She became softer, more careful, less expressive about her needs. Not healthier, just quieter. That should have alarmed him immediately. Instead, he partially relaxed. Because the relationship felt emotionally easier once she stopped confronting the distance directly. Which sounds awful, but it's true. People often confuse reduced conflict with improved connection. Meanwhile, the emotional intimacy is slowly starving underneath. One afternoon, she sent him a long, vulnerable paragraph about how disconnected she'd been feeling lately. He read it 3 times, then put the phone face down on the kitchen counter and started cleaning his apartment. Not because he didn't care, because he cared so much that his body flooded with overwhelm. That's the kind of thing nobody explains properly. Sometimes avoidance looks irrational from the outside because internally is irrational. He started wiping down already clean countertops just to regulate himself emotionally. Then reorganized a drawer. Then paced the apartment. Then opened her message again. His chest tightened reading it. Not because she was attacking him, because she was being honest. Honesty is difficult when you secretly know someone deserves more emotional consistency from you than you know how to provide. He almost answered vulnerably that night too. Almost. He typed, "I know I've been distant. I think I get scared when things become emotionally serious." Then deleted it immediately. Too exposed. Instead, he sent, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I've just been stressed lately." Even sending that made him feel exhausted. And the terrifying thing, part of him believed his own explanation. Because emotional avoidance often disguises itself as practicality, stress, independence, logic, anything except fear. But underneath all of it, he was slowly becoming emotionally dependent on someone he kept acting emotionally uncertain about. And he didn't fully realize how dangerous that contradiction was until much later. Until she stopped reaching for him the same way. Until her warmth became less automatic. Until the attention he once quietly relied on started disappearing in small, unbearable pieces. That's when the panic began. Not loudly at first. Just tiny moments. Opening his phone expecting her message and feeling disappointed when there wasn't one. Reading old conversations longer than necessary. feeling strangely anxious when her energy changed, but pretending not to notice. By then, the damage had already started settling in. He just didn't understand it yet. The strange thing is, he didn't notice her leaving emotionally at first because technically she was still there, still replying, still asking about his day, still showing up. That's what makes emotional disconnection so hard to recognize in real time. People think love disappears dramatically, like slam doors, final speeches, blocked numbers. Sometimes it leaves quietly. Sometimes it leaves through exhaustion. And exhaustion is subtle in the beginning. It sounds like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You're probably busy. Sent a little too quickly, with just enough softness to avoid conflict. At first, he liked that things felt calmer between them. Less emotional tension, less difficult conversations, less moments where he felt cornered by her sadness, which sounds selfish. Maybe it was. But emotionally avoidant people often experience confrontation, even healthy confrontation, as physical overwhelm. Not because the other person is abusive, not because accountability is inherently toxic. Their body just interprets emotional intensity like danger. So when she started becoming quieter, part of him relaxed, and part of him felt uneasy in a way he couldn't explain, because her emotional pursuit had become part of the relationship's rhythm. Her checking in, her asking questions, her trying to reconnect after distance. Even her frustration reassured him subconsciously. At least frustration meant she still cared enough to fight for closeness. But then she slowly stopped fighting. That changed the atmosphere immediately. One night, he took 6 hours to respond to her message. Not because he was intentionally ignoring her. He just kept thinking, I'll answer in a minute. Then work distracted him. Then scrolling distracted him. Then exhaustion. By the time he finally replied, he already knew from the silence that she was hurt. Usually she would have sensed something else by then. A meme. A second thought. A passive-aggressive joke pretending not to be passive-aggressive. But this time there was nothing. Just his message sitting there alone afterward. And he stared at the screen longer than necessary. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because something small had changed. She was beginning to emotionally detach from the cycle. At the time, he told himself that was probably healthier. Maybe she's just giving me space. That's what he called it. Space. Sometimes space is real. Sometimes it's emotional decay wearing mature language. He didn't know which one this was yet, but his body noticed before his mind did. He started checking his phone more often, not consciously, just little unconscious movements, unlocking it during commercials, opening their chat absent-mindedly, looking for her name in his notifications even while pretending he enjoyed the quieter dynamic. And every time there wasn't a message from her, something in him dipped slightly. A tiny emotional drop he kept refusing to fully acknowledge. Because admitting he depended on her attention would force him to confront how much emotional reassurance he'd been quietly receiving from someone he kept acting uncertain about. That realization threatened his self-image. So instead, he intellectualized everything. She's probably just busy. This is normal. Relationships settle. But deep down, he could feel the emotional temperature changing. There was one moment he replayed later more times than he wanted to admit. She called him one evening while he was driving. Nothing serious. She just wanted to tell him something funny that happened at work. Normally, she would ramble excitedly and accidentally interrupt herself halfway through stories, because her brain moved faster than her mouth. He used to secretly love that. This time, though, she sounded restrained, still kind, Still warm, but careful, like someone unconsciously reducing emotional risk. And halfway through the conversation, there was this awkward silence neither of them filled immediately. He remembers gripping the steering wheel tighter for some reason. "You still there?" she asked. "Yeah." Another silence. Then she laughed softly and said, "You sound far away lately." Not accusing, not even angry, just tired. That tiredness hit him harder than anger ever had. Because anger still reaches. Tiredness starts letting go. He wanted to say something honest then. Something real. Something like, "I know, I don't know why I keep doing this." Or, "I think I'm scared you matter too much now." But instead he looked at the traffic light turning red and said, "I've just had a lot on my mind." There it was again. That phrase. Safe, vague, emotionally incomplete. And she accepted it, at least outwardly. But he could feel disappointment settling quietly underneath her silence. After they hung up, he sat in his parked car for almost 10 minutes staring through the windshield. Not crying, not dramatically spiraling, just feeling unsettled. Like he had missed another opportunity to emotionally meet her halfway and knew it. That awareness started happening more often. Tiny moments where he could feel the relationship asking something emotionally difficult from him, and instinctively retreat anyway. Then feel guilty afterward. Then avoid the guilt too. That cycle is exhausting. For both people. Especially because externally he still looked functional. He still flirted. Still laughed. Still held her. Still said he cared. And he did care. That's what made everything confusing. Because people assume emotional inconsistency always means absence of love. Sometimes it means someone's emotional capacity cannot sustain the depth of connection they accidentally created. That doesn't excuse the damage, but it's real. One weekend she came over to his apartment and immediately something felt different. Not bad, just dimmer. She moved around the kitchen quietly while he cooked. Normally, she would have teased him about something small by then. Stolen food off his plate. Wrapped her arms around him absent-mindedly. Started some pointless debate just to hear him argue back. This time she mostly kept to herself. And weirdly, he started trying harder. Talking more. Making more jokes. Touching her more often. Not consciously manipulative. More like emotional panic leaking out sideways. Because suddenly he could feel her attention retracting slightly and his body reacted before his ego caught up. That's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes avoidant people only fully move toward connection once they feel it's slipping away. Not because they're evil. Because emotional safety made them complacent while potential loss activates urgency. The human nervous system is messy like that. At one point, she sat cross-legged on his couch scrolling quietly through her phone while he cleaned dishes. And he kept glancing back at her. There was nothing visibly wrong. But he felt anxious anyway. "Are you okay?" he finally asked. The irony of hearing himself say that almost made him laugh. She looked up slowly. "Yeah. You seem quiet." "I'm just tired." He recognized the sentence immediately because it sounded exactly like him. That bothered him more than he expected. For a second, he almost pushed deeper. Almost asked the real question. "Are you giving up on me emotionally?" But fear interrupted before honesty could fully form. Because if she answered yes, he would finally have to confront what his distance had actually done. So instead, he kissed the top of her head and changed the subject. Avoidance doesn't always look cold. Sometimes it looks gentle. That's why it becomes so difficult to explain later. Weeks pass like that. Not catastrophic. Not fully stable either. Just emotionally uneven. and she kept adjusting herself around his inconsistency in smaller heartbreaking ways. She stopped sending long, vulnerable paragraphs. Stopped asking where the relationship was going. Stopped reacting strongly when he disappeared emotionally. At first, he interpreted that as improvement. Less pressure. Less conflict. Relief. Then one night he realized something horrifying. She no longer expected him to emotionally show up consistently. That realization hit during something stupidly ordinary. He had forgotten to call her after saying he would. Again, he texted 2 hours later. "Sorry, got distracted." She replied, "No worries." That smiley face destroyed him more than anger would have, because it felt emotionally detached, polite, too easy. No frustration, no sadness, no attempt to explain her disappointment, just quiet acceptance. And suddenly he missed the version of her that still fought for closeness. That realization filled him with shame almost immediately, because now that she was emotionally adapting to his absence, he wanted her emotional intensity back. Human beings are disturbingly contradictory sometimes, especially when abandonment fear finally activates beneath avoidance. That night he opened their old messages and scrolled upward for almost an hour, looking at photos, voice notes, conversations from earlier months when everything felt emotionally alive and messy and deeply connected. He found one message from her that simply said, "I miss you even when you're being emotionally weird." He stared at it forever, because she had seen him clearly long before he saw himself clearly. And instead of meeting her there, he kept hiding behind distance that even he no longer fully understood. That's the tragedy of it. By the time he started realizing how deeply he needed her emotional presence, she was already learning how to survive without it. At first, the distance felt manageable. That's the part he would later feel guilty admitting. Because when things finally became quieter between them, when she stopped trying to pull emotional honesty out of him every few days, when the long, vulnerable conversations disappeared, he breathed easier, not happier, just less emotionally cornered. There's a difference. For a while, he genuinely convinced himself this was healthier. No pressure, no emotional intensity, no difficult conversations at midnight where she asked questions he didn't know how to answer without exposing parts of himself he'd spent years hiding. The relationship became lighter on the surface, and he mistook lighter for better. That happens a lot when someone has spent most of their life associating intimacy with emotional overwhelm. He started sleeping easier, spending more time on his hobbies, scrolling longer at night without feeling guilty for not replying immediately. There was relief in it. Temporary relief. The kind people feel when emotional responsibility loosens before they realize connection is loosening too. And because she hadn't fully disappeared yet, he didn't panic. Not at first. She still replied, still answered his calls, still sent occasional updates about her day. But something fundamental had shifted underneath all of it. The emotional current was weaker now, less reaching, less softness, less unconscious devotion. He felt it constantly without fully naming it. Like walking into a room that looks identical, but somehow feels colder. One night he realized she hadn't asked how he was doing emotionally in over a week. That sounds small, but for her, it wasn't. She used to notice everything. His mood changes, his silence, the way his voice flattened when he was mentally overwhelmed, the difference between his "I'm fine" and his actual fine. Sometimes she understood him in ways that honestly irritated him because it made hiding impossible. And now suddenly, she wasn't reaching for those details anymore. At first, his ego translated that as freedom. Then slowly, his body started translating it as loss. The weird thing about emotional absence is that you often feel it physically before mentally. His apartment started feeling strangely empty even though nothing had changed. Same couch, same kitchen, same routines. But there was this subtle emotional stillness now that started pressing against him during ordinary moments. He'd come home from work and instinctively check his phone before even taking off his shoes. Nothing from her, and immediately he'd feel annoyed with himself for caring. Relax, he'd think. She's probably busy. Then he'd throw his phone onto the bed dramatically like he was above needing reassurance. 10 minutes later, he'd pick it up again. Human beings are embarrassing when attachment gets involved, especially people who pride themselves on independence. One Friday night, he drove aimlessly for almost an hour after leaving a friend's house. No music, just streetlights and random thoughts. He kept thinking about a tiny moment from months earlier. They had been sitting in traffic together when she randomly reached over and fixed the collar of his jacket without saying anything. That was it. Such a stupid small memory. But suddenly it emotionally wrecked him. Because nobody had cared for him gently like that in years. And at the time, he barely reacted. Probably made some sarcastic joke to deflect the tenderness. Now, he replayed the memory at red lights like his brain was trying to emotionally punish him retroactively. You miss her. No, I just miss the attention. Do you? That question stayed hanging in his mind uncomfortably. Because deep down he knew it wasn't just attention. It was her specifically. The way she emotionally entered spaces. The way she noticed things. The way she stayed emotionally present during moments most people mentally checked out from. And maybe worse than missing her, he missed who he became around her sometimes. Softer, more emotionally open, less numb. That realization scared him enough that he immediately distracted himself afterward. That became another pattern. Emotional realization, then immediate avoidance. He'd almost touch the truth internally, then drown it in nice before it settled fully. More social media, more work, more casual conversations that meant nothing, more temporary dopamine hits. At one point, he even tried talking to someone else casually. Not seriously, just enough distraction to convince himself he was moving on emotionally. But the entire interaction felt strangely hollow. The woman laughed at his jokes, touched his arm while talking, flirted openly, and instead of excitement, he felt tired. Because chemistry without emotional depth suddenly felt strangely empty after experiencing someone who had actually seen him clearly. That realization irritated him too. He didn't want to be emotionally affected this deeply. Especially not now. Not after creating the distance himself. That's the humiliating part nobody talks about enough. Sometimes avoidant people create the emotional separation, then become emotionally devastated once the other person adapts to it. One night he opened her profile after telling himself all day he wouldn't. He stared at a photo of her for almost a full minute. She looked calm. Not performatively happy. Not heartbreak posting. Not trying to make him jealous. Just peaceful. That bothered him in ways he couldn't explain. Because somewhere inside himself, he had unconsciously expected her to remain emotionally suspended around him forever. Not intentionally. Just selfishly. He thought she would always feel reachable. Emotionally available. And now, suddenly, there was distance in her eyes even through a screen. He closed the app immediately afterward and paced his apartment like he'd touched something emotionally hot. This is ridiculous, he muttered to himself. But his chest still felt tight. That night, he dreamed about her for the first time in weeks. Nothing dramatic happened in the dream. They were just grocery shopping together, arguing playfully over cereal brands. Normal couple things. He woke up feeling devastated anyway, because grief becomes especially confusing when you miss ordinary intimacy more than grand romantic moments. He missed being known casually. That's what started haunting him. Not just passion, not just attraction, familiarity. Her sitting on the bathroom counter while he shaved. Her stealing fries off his plate after saying she wasn't hungry. Her voice in the background while he cooked. Those tiny domestic details suddenly became emotionally enormous in hindsight, and the silence around him started changing shape. At first, silence had felt peaceful. Now it felt loud. He started sleeping with the TV on just to avoid the stillness of his apartment at night. Started scrolling until 2 a.m. because lying alone and quiet made memories surface too aggressively. Sometimes he'd replay old conversations in his head while brushing his teeth, while driving, while pretending to pay attention during meetings. One sentence from her especially stayed lodged in his mind. "You only pull away when things become real." At the time, he denied it instantly. Now, the sentence followed him everywhere. Because once someone tells you the truth about yourself at the right moment, your mind keeps revisiting it until your pride finally breaks down enough to absorb it. He began noticing how often he emotionally retreated after closeness, after vulnerable conversations, after intimacy, after moments where she clearly mattered too much. It wasn't random. It was patterned. And suddenly he couldn't unsee it anymore. That realization created a very specific kind of shame. Not dramatic self-hatred. Worse, quiet accountability. The kind where you start recognizing your own emotional immaturity in small painful flashes throughout the day. Like hearing your own detached phrases replay in your memory. "I just need space. I'm overwhelmed. I'm not good at this stuff." Technically true, but incomplete. Because the deeper truth was, he had been terrified of dependency, terrified that loving someone deeply would eventually expose needs he didn't know how to safely carry. So instead, he controlled closeness through distance. And now, the distance had become real enough to hurt him too. That's the irony. Avoidance feels protective until loneliness starts sounding louder than intimacy ever did. One Sunday afternoon, he almost called her. He stared at her contact photo for a long time first, thumb hovering over the screen. His chest felt ridiculously tight for something so simple. Just call her. What would I even say? The truth. I don't even fully know the truth yet. That was the problem. His feelings had matured slower than the consequences of his behavior. And now, he was emotionally arriving late to something she had already suffered through in real time. Eventually, he locked the phone and set it face down. Didn't call. Then spent the next 3 hours thinking about calling. That's another reality people rarely describe accurately. Avoidance is not always clean absence. Sometimes it's obsessive hesitation, wanting connection while simultaneously fearing what reconnecting might expose emotionally. He wondered constantly whether she missed him too, then immediately hated himself for wondering, because some part of him knew missing her now didn't erase how emotionally alone she probably felt while still loving him. That truth started landing harder lately, especially at night, especially in silence, especially during those strange moments where his life looked completely normal externally, while internally something was unraveling quietly for the first time in years. He told himself he was fine. That became his favorite lie because technically it was believable. He was still functioning, still going to work, still answering people, still laughing at things, still sleeping sort of. Nothing in his life looked catastrophic from the outside, which made it easier to dismiss what was happening internally. But grief doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it enters through repetition, through tiny compulsive behaviors you barely notice until they become part of your routine. Like checking her profile before bed. Not every night. That's what he told himself. Just sometimes. Usually when the apartment felt too quiet. Usually after a bad day. Usually after drinking slightly more than intended. Usually after remembering something stupidly small that emotionally opened the floodgate again. The problem was, it stopped feeling optional after a while. His body would reach for the phone before his mind even fully formed the thought. Open up. Type her name. Pause. Sometimes he stared at her profile picture longer than necessary, trying to detect emotional clues from tiny details. Did she look happier? Tired? Different? Had someone taken the photo for her? That question bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Because jealousy after emotional withdrawal creates a very specific kind of shame, especially when you're the one who created the distance first. He hated how hypocritical it felt. He wanted freedom from emotional pressure, but also wanted to remain emotionally important to her. Human beings can be painfully selfish when attachment and fear collide. One night she posted a picture from a restaurant he recognized. Nothing romantic, just dinner. But he zoomed into the reflection in the window anyway, looking for another person, looking for evidence. Then immediately felt disgusted with himself afterward. What are you doing? No answer. Just silence and the blue light from his phone lighting up his face in a dark room. The humiliating part wasn't even the checking. It was how emotionally affected he became afterward. His mood could shift for hours over one tiny thing. A caption, a song she shared, a photo where she looked genuinely relaxed, especially relaxed. That unsettled him the most, because part of him unconsciously expected her to still carry visible sadness over him. Not forever, just longer. Long enough to reassure him that what they had mattered equally. But she started looking emotionally lighter, and instead of relief, he felt panic slowly blooming underneath his ribs. Not full panic. Something quieter, like emotional displacement. Like suddenly realizing the emotional home you kept casually leaving might not stay unlocked forever. So naturally, he considered reaching out. Constantly. That became another exhausting internal cycle. He'd think about messaging her while doing completely ordinary things. Standing in line for coffee. Sitting in traffic. Brushing his teeth. Watching random videos he wasn't even paying attention to. Sometimes entire imaginary conversations played out in his head. Hey, been thinking about you. Too obvious. I saw something today that reminded me of you. Too emotional. How have you been? Too fake. Because that's the thing about reconnecting after emotional distance. Small talk suddenly feels dishonest. But honesty feels terrifying. So he stayed trapped between both. One Thursday night, he actually typed out a full paragraph. Not polished. Not performative. Real. I know I became distant when things got emotionally serious between us. I think I was overwhelmed by how much I actually felt and handled it badly. He stared at the message for almost 15 minutes. Heart pounding stupidly hard, reading it over and over, editing tiny words, deleting commas, adding them back, then eventually deleting the entire thing. Not because it wasn't true, because vulnerability felt physically dangerous now. That's something people misunderstand about emotionally avoidant behavior. It's not always calculated manipulation. Sometimes the nervous system genuinely reacts to emotional exposure like a threat. His chest tightened. His stomach dropped. His brain immediately started generating escape thoughts. What if she ignores it? What if she moved on? What if this just makes you look weak? What if you hurt her again anyway? So instead of sending the truth, he sent nothing. And afterward, he felt both relieved and miserable simultaneously. That contradiction became normal. Relief after avoidance, then grief because of the avoidance. Over and over. There was one particularly bad night where everything hit him harder than usual. He had gone out with friends. Nothing special. Just drinks and meaningless conversation. Everyone around him seemed emotionally detached in the casual, socially acceptable way adulthood teaches people to become. Talking about work, gym routines, dating apps, surface-level attraction. And suddenly, he felt profoundly disconnected from all of it. Because once you've experienced someone emotionally seeing you deeply, performing emotional indifference starts feeling exhausting. He left early without really explaining why. Drove home with the windows cracked because the cold air helped calm him down slightly. At a red light, he opened her chat again. The last message between them was painfully normal. No dramatic ending. No closure. Just ordinary conversation slowly dying from emotional exhaustion. That somehow hurt worse. Because there was no clean point to blame. No singular moment to villainize. Just hundreds of tiny missed opportunities for emotional honesty accumulating over time. He scrolled upward through old conversations for almost an hour after getting home. Voice notes, photos, random arguments, inside jokes. At one point, he found a blurry picture she took of him when he wasn't paying attention. He looked relaxed in it. Soft, even. He stared at the photo with this strange ache in his chest because he realized something uncomfortable. She had experienced versions of him emotionally that almost nobody else ever did. And instead of trusting that intimacy, he kept interrupting it with distance. There was another message that stayed lodged in his mind afterward. She once said, "You act like needing someone is losing something." At the time, he got defensive immediately. Now, the sentence followed him everywhere. Because she was right. He had spent years equating emotional self-protection with strength. Years believing dependency made people weak, needy, and safe. So every time he genuinely needed her emotionally, his instinct was to create distance to regain internal control. But the problem with suppressing attachment is that it doesn't disappear. It leaks into insomnia, into obsessive thoughts, into emotional numbness, into compulsive checking behaviors you pretend mean nothing. One afternoon at work, he opened her profile without even consciously deciding to. That scared him a little. Not the action itself, the automatic nature of it. Like his body had developed its own attachment rituals outside his conscious pride. He quickly closed the app when he realized what he was doing, then reopened it 2 minutes later anyway. That's the ugly reality nobody romanticizes correctly. Emotional suppression often creates obsession, not freedom. Especially once the other person emotionally stops chasing you. Because suddenly there's space for your own feelings to echo back at you without interruption. And silence can become brutally clarifying. He started noticing how often he looked for her unconsciously in daily life. A woman laughing in a grocery store sounding vaguely like her. A sweater in her favorite color. A song she used to play in the car. Even tiny things emotionally ambushed him now. One night, he heard someone pronounce a word wrong the exact same way she always did. His chest physically tightened. That's how memory works sometimes. Not grand cinematic flashbacks. Tiny sensory attacks. A voice. A smell. A phrase. And suddenly the person exists inside the room with you again for half a second. He began realizing that he hadn't actually processed the loss at all. He had only avoided it. There's a difference. Avoidance delays emotional impact. It doesn't erase it. Eventually, everything catches up. Usually quietly. Usually at inconvenient times. Like standing in the kitchen at midnight eating cereal straight from the box while rereading old messages and wondering why your chest hurts over someone you kept insisting you needed space from. The human mind is contradictory like that. One part of him still wanted to maintain emotional control, still resisted vulnerability, still feared rejection, still feared looking desperate. Another part desperately wanted to hear her voice again, not even to fix everything, just to feel close to her for a few minutes. That longing started becoming harder to outrun, and what made it worse was realizing she probably spent months feeling this exact emotional confusion while he emotionally retreated from her in real time. Now, he was finally sitting inside the silence she had already survived. And suddenly, he understood why it exhausted her so much. Because uncertainty slowly consumes people, especially when love is involved, especially when someone keeps almost reaching for you, then disappearing emotionally before fully arriving. Late one night, he whispered something out loud accidentally while staring at his phone. "I miss you." The room stayed silent afterward. No breakthrough. No dramatic revelation. Just him standing there alone, finally admitting a truth his behavior had been revealing for months anyway. Memory becomes cruel after distance. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just weirdly specific. That's what nobody prepares you for. You think you'll miss the big moments, the anniversaries, the late night confessions, the intimacy. But what actually stays lodged inside him are these tiny, ordinary fragments he barely appreciated while they were happening. The way she always warmed up his side of the bed with her feet before falling asleep. The way she said drive safe like she genuinely meant it every single time. The way she could sense his mood from one-word texts and still pretend not to push too hard. Back then, he thought those things would always exist in the background of his life somehow. That's the dangerous thing about consistent love. Human beings start treating emotional presence like infrastructure. Permanent, reliable, expected, and only later realize was a choice someone kept making over and over again. A choice that eventually exhausted her. One night, he was cleaning his kitchen after dinner when he found one of her hair ties shoved behind the coffee machine. Tiny thing. Cheap black elastic. That's all. But his entire body froze for a second, because suddenly she existed in the room again. Not metaphorically. Physically. He could almost hear her absent-mindedly asking where she left it. Could picture her standing there half awake on a Sunday morning, stealing his coffee while searching for it. And what hit him hardest wasn't even missing her. It was realizing how emotionally unavailable he had been during so many moments that actually mattered. Moments he only understood emotionally after they became memories. That realization started happening constantly now. Like emotional hindsight arriving in violent little flushes. He'd replay conversations and suddenly hear her exhaustion underneath her words for the first time. Not because she hid it badly, because he wasn't emotionally ready to fully absorb it back then. There's a difference. One memory especially haunted him lately. She had once asked him, "Why do I feel closest to you right before you pull away?" At the time, he immediately got defensive. What does that even mean? It means every time we get emotionally closer, you disappear afterward. I don't disappear. You do. No, I just need space sometimes. And technically, he believed himself. That's the uncomfortable part. Avoidant behavior often feels internally justified while actively hurting someone else. He genuinely thought he was just protecting his independence, regulating himself, managing stress. Meanwhile, she was slowly experiencing emotional abandonment in pieces. Now, months later, he could finally hear the sadness in her voice during that conversation. The sadness he ignored because accountability overwhelmed him emotionally at the time. That's what regret actually feels like most days. Not dramatic suffering, delayed understanding. He started recognizing how often she tried to communicate pain gently before finally emotionally shutting down. That realization made him feel sick sometimes. Because she really did try. Not perfectly, not always calmly, but honestly. And honesty terrified him more than conflict ever did. Conflict at least gave him something to resist. Something external, but vulnerable honesty. That demanded emotional presence from him. And emotional presence was exactly where he kept failing. There was another moment he couldn't stop replaying. They had gone out to dinner somewhere small and crowded. Nothing fancy. At one point during the meal, she reached across the table and held his hand while talking about something completely unrelated. Just instinctively, comfortably, and instead of relaxing into it, he felt trapped for a second. Not because he didn't want her touching him, because tenderness made him feel emotionally exposed in public. So he gently pulled his hand away under the excuse of grabbing his drink. Such a tiny movement. She barely reacted outwardly. But now he remembered the micro-expression afterward. That almost invisible withdrawal people do when they feel emotionally rejected, but don't want to create tension over it. At the time, he ignored it. Now it followed him everywhere. That's the brutal thing about memory once guilt enters it. Your brain starts reclassifying moments. Things that once felt insignificant suddenly become emotionally radioactive. One afternoon, he sat in his car outside a grocery store for 20 minutes, replaying another memory he used to dismiss. She had once fallen asleep against his chest during a movie, and instead of enjoying it fully, part of him spent the entire time mentally preparing for when she'd eventually leave so he could breathe normally again. That sounds horrible when spoken aloud, but emotional closeness genuinely overwhelmed him sometimes. Even when he wanted it. Especially when he wanted it. That contradiction became impossible to ignore now. Because if he truly didn't care, why was he mentally living inside old moments every day? Why did random memories physically affect him this much? Why did hearing certain songs suddenly tighten his chest? Why did he keep replaying her voice in his head while pretending externally that everything was normal? At some point, the denial became harder to maintain than the truth itself. And the truth was painfully simple. He loved her. Not perfectly, not maturely, not consistently enough, but genuinely. And somehow that made the regret worse. Because it forced him to confront a reality most people spend years avoiding. Love by itself does not automatically make someone emotionally safe. That realization broke something open in him quietly. He started seeing his own behavior more clearly in hindsight. How often he withdrew after intimacy. How often he intellectualized emotions instead of feeling them. How often he relied on her emotional steadiness while criticizing her for needing reassurance. There was hypocrisy inside him he hadn't wanted to face before. One night, he remembered a conversation that happened after she cried in front of him for the first time. Not loud crying, not dramatic, just silent tears while trying to explain how disconnected she'd been feeling. And he remembers feeling overwhelmed almost immediately. Not compassion at first, overwhelmed first. That realization devastated him later, because instead of holding space emotionally, he went into problem-solving mood. You're overthinking. We're okay. You're making this bigger than it is. He thought he was calming the situation down. Now, he understood what she actually needed was emotional honesty, not emotional minimization. But honesty required him to admit something terrifying. That he felt deeply attached to her and didn't know how to handle the vulnerability that came with it. So, instead, he kept trying to reduce emotional intensity instead of understanding it. Eventually, she stopped bringing certain feelings to him entirely. That part hurts him now too, because he remembers the exact phase where she started emotionally editing herself around him, talking less, needing less, pretending more, not because she became less emotional, because she became less safe emotionally. And the sickest part, he partially preferred the quieter version of her at the time. Less conflict, less pressure, less emotional responsibility, until the silence became permanent enough to scare him. Human beings really do wait until warmth disappears to fully understand how cold they already were. That realization arrived slowly, in grocery stores, in traffic, in late-night insomnia, in moments where his life looked completely ordinary externally, while internally he kept emotionally revisiting the same unresolved relationship. One evening, he found himself rereading old messages again, something he promised himself he'd stop doing. He landed on a paragraph she once sent after an argument. "I don't need perfection from you. I just need to feel like you're emotionally here with me sometimes." He had forgotten she said that. Or maybe he intentionally buried it because it made him uncomfortable. Reading it now made his throat tighten, because she wasn't asking him to become someone else. She was asking him to stop disappearing emotionally every time intimacy became real. And he couldn't do it. Or wouldn't. Maybe both. That distinction started haunting him too. What if you knew exactly what you were doing? No. Didn't you? Those private arguments with himself became more frequent lately. Because accountability is messy when you can finally see your behavior clearly, can't undo its impact anymore. He started wondering how lonely she must have felt loving someone emotionally inconsistent. How many nights she probably stared at her phone wondering why he suddenly became distant again. How often she blamed herself for emotional shifts that were actually happening inside him. That realization filled him with shame in quieter, more mature ways now. Not self-pity, not dramatic guilt spirals, just painful clarity. And clarity arrived too late. That's the part nobody romanticizes honestly enough. Sometimes growth begins after the relationship already broke under the weight of who you were before the growth happened. One night, while lying awake, he remembered something she used to say jokingly whenever he emotionally retreated. "There he goes again." At the time, he rolled his eyes every time. Now, hearing the sentence inside his own memory made his chest ache. Because she had been witnessing his patterns long before he was brave enough to name them himself. And despite all of it, she stayed longer than most people would have. Long enough to become emotionally exhausted. Long enough to slowly stop reaching. Long enough for her love to turn into survival instead of connection. That truth settled heavily into him now, not as some dramatic awakening, just a quiet, unbearable understanding he couldn't escape anymore. By the time he finally started understanding the depth of what she gave him emotionally, she had already learned how to live without receiving it back consistently. He didn't notice the exact moment it happened. That's what haunted him later. There was no dramatic announcement. No final speech. No "I'm done" moment that cleanly divided the relationship into before and after. She just slowly stopped emotionally orienting herself around him. And somehow that hurt more. Because when someone is still fighting for you, even angrily, there's movement, energy, emotional friction. But when someone stops waiting, the atmosphere changes completely. It becomes quiet in a way that feels irreversible. He started sensing it in tiny interactions first. Like how she no longer replied immediately even when she was clearly online. How her messages became shorter but strangely calmer. How she stopped emotionally pulling on conversations that naturally faded out. At first he told himself he was imagining it. Then one night it hit him all at once. He had sent her something funny, a video that normally would have turned into a 30-minute conversation between them. She reacted with a simple, "Lol, that's cute." That was it. No follow-up thought. No teasing. No emotional extension. He stared at the message way longer than necessary. Something about it unsettled him deeply. Not because she was rude, because she sounded emotionally complete without him there. That realization landed physically. His stomach dropped slightly. His chest tightened. And immediately his brain started reaching for explanations. She's probably tired. She's busy. You're overthinking. But deep down, he knew. He knew the emotional gravity between them had changed. There's a specific kind of pain that happens when someone who once emotionally revolved around you suddenly begins revolving around themselves again, especially if part of you unconsciously believed they always would wait. That's the ugly truth he had to confront. Somewhere deep inside himself, he assumed she would always emotionally stay available. Not because he consciously wanted to hurt her. Not because he thought she was weak. He just got used to her emotional entrance. Got used to her returning after distance. Got used to her trying again after confusion. Got used to her loving him through inconsistency he never fully addressed. Until one day, she quietly stopped. And the terrifying thing was, once she stopped chasing clarity from him, he finally had enough silence to hear his own feelings clearly. That irony almost made him angry. He started becoming emotionally restless in ways he couldn't regulate anymore. Small things affected him disproportionately now. If she took too long to respond, his mood shifted. If she sounded detached on the phone, he replayed the conversation afterward for hours. If she posted something happy without mentioning him, he felt strangely abandoned even though he had emotionally abandoned her repeatedly first. Human beings can be disturbingly unfair emotionally when fear finally catches up to them. One night he saw she had gone out with friends. There was a photo someone tagged her in. She looked genuinely happy. Head tilted back laughing. Eyes relaxed. Not performing. Not trying to send a message. Just alive. And instead of feeling relieved she was okay, he felt grief. Not because she moved on romantically. Nothing even suggested that. But because she looked emotionally lighter without carrying the constant weight of waiting for him. That realization exposed something painful inside him. Her suffering had quietly reassured him for a long time. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but as long as she was visibly hurting over him, part of him still felt emotionally central in her life. Now, suddenly, she seemed to be rebuilding an emotional world that didn't fully depend on him anymore. And his nervous system reacted immediately. He almost messaged her that night. Actually opened the chat 3 separate times. Typed, "You look happy." Deleted it. Too loaded. Then, "Looks like you had fun tonight." Deleted that too. Too transparent. Eventually, he locked the phone and tossed it onto the bed aggressively like the device itself offended him. Then picked it back up 5 minutes later. That became another humiliating cycle. Emotional impulse. Retreat. Regret. Repeat. At some point, he sat on the edge of his bed staring at the wall thinking something he hated admitting even privately. What if she really stops loving me? Not moves on. Not starts dating someone else. Stops loving him. Those are different fears. And this one reached somewhere deeper. Because for the first time, he understood that love is not infinite simply because someone feels it deeply. Love can exhaust itself trying to survive inconsistency. That realization changed the way he remembered her entirely. He started noticing how often she waited for him emotionally. Waited for replies. Waited for reassurance. Waited for vulnerability. Waited for emotional presence. and he had mistaken her patience for permanence. That mistake shattered something inside him slowly. There was one memory he couldn't stop replaying. She once waited in his apartment while he emotionally shut down after an argument. Not yelling, not fighting. He just withdrew into silence for hours. She sat on the couch quietly pretending to watch TV, while occasionally glancing toward him like she was trying to decide whether approaching him emotionally would help or make things worse. Back then, he interpreted her patience as pressure, as emotional expectation, as something suffocating. Now, he remembered the loneliness in her face instead. That's what regret does. It rearranges memory until the truth finally becomes unavoidable. And the truth was, she had spent months trying to stay emotionally connected to someone who kept instinctively retreating every time intimacy became too real. One afternoon, he accidentally saw an old video of her in his camera roll. She didn't know he was recording. She was standing in his kitchen dancing badly while waiting for food to heat up in the microwave. At one point, she noticed the camera and laughed. Delete that immediately. He remembered pretending to delete it while secretly keeping it. Watching it now nearly destroyed him. Not because of the video itself, because of how safe she looked there. Comfortable, open, emotionally unguarded. And suddenly he understood the full tragedy of what happened between them. She had slowly stopped being emotionally safe too. Not naturally, not randomly, adaptively. People become guarded after loving inconsistency long enough. That realization hit him hardest late at night. That's when honesty usually arrived now. Not during the day when distractions worked. Not around friends. Not during work. At night, when the apartment became quiet enough for his own thoughts to corner him. One night he whispered something to himself while staring at the ceiling. You made her stop trusting your presence. The sentence sat heavily in the dark, because that was the deeper wound underneath everything. It wasn't just that she missed him less now. She stopped emotionally relying on him. And once someone emotionally detaches for self-protection, their warmth changes permanently. Sometimes they still love you, but differently, more cautiously, less hopefully. He could feel that difference every time they spoke now. There was more space in her voice, less unconscious reaching. Even her laughter sounded more self-contained somehow. And perversely, the healthier she became emotionally, the more anxious he became. Because now he was the one uncertain, the one waiting, the one checking, the one hoping for signs. The emotional roles had quietly reversed, and he didn't know how to handle it, especially because part of him still wanted to maintain emotional control. He didn't want to look desperate, didn't want to appear weak, didn't want to fully expose how deeply he was unraveling internally now that her attention no longer came automatically. So he kept trying to appear casual during conversations. But his body betrayed him constantly, rereading her messages multiple times before answering, checking when she was last online, feeling irrational relief whenever she sounded emotionally warm again. One day she sent him a simple message. Hope you're doing okay. That was it. Normal sentence. Kind even. But he sat there staring at it with tears burning unexpectedly behind his eyes. Because months earlier she would have asked deeper questions, pushed further, stayed emotionally engaged longer. Now her care felt lighter, healthier, more detached, and he suddenly understood something devastating. She had finally learned how to love him without abandoning herself. Meanwhile, he was only now beginning to understand how much of himself had been hidden behind avoidance all along. That's the cruel timing of emotional growth sometimes. One person becomes exhausted enough to let go, right when the other person finally becomes emotionally aware enough to hold on. And there's no guarantee those timelines will ever meet again. The worst part wasn't losing her attention. It was finally understanding what loving him probably felt like. That realization arrived slowly, unevenly, not in one giant moment of clarity. More like dozens of small humiliating realizations spread across ordinary days. He'd suddenly remember a conversation differently. Hear a sentence she said months ago with completely new emotional context. Recognize his own behavior from the outside for the first time and physically cringe. That started happening constantly now. And honestly, it exhausted him. Because self-awareness sounds beautiful in theory. In reality, it often feels embarrassing. Especially when you realize someone tried very hard to love you gently while you kept treating emotional intimacy like something to survive instead of participate in. One morning, he was halfway through making coffee when he remembered a random night from months earlier. She had sent him, "Can you just tell me if something's wrong instead of disappearing?" At the time, he felt annoyed reading it. Not because she was cruel, because he immediately experienced the message as pressure, expectation, demand, emotional responsibility. Now standing alone in his kitchen, replaying it months later, he finally heard the vulnerability underneath it. She wasn't attacking him. She was asking not to feel abandoned. That distinction hit him hard. So many moments he once labeled as too emotional suddenly looked completely reasonable through hindsight. And the terrifying thing was, he understood why she eventually became exhausted. Not intellectually, emotionally. There's a difference. He started imagining what the relationship must have felt like from her side. Waiting for replies while trying not to seem needy. Overanalyzing changes in his tone. Feeling close to him one day and emotionally shut out the next. Trying to stay soft with someone who kept pulling away every time things became emotionally real. That kind of inconsistency slowly damages people. Not loudly, quietly. It makes them doubt their instincts, question their emotional needs, shrink themselves to avoid pushing the other person further away. And she did shrink herself eventually. That realization wrecked him, because he remembered the earlier version of her so clearly now. Expressive, playful, emotionally direct. She used to send paragraphs when something mattered, used to ask difficult questions, used to reach for him emotionally without hesitation. Then over time, she started sounding more careful, more edited, as if she was constantly calculating how much honesty the relationship could survive before he emotionally disappeared again. One night he replayed an old argument in his head while lying in bed, unable to sleep. Not even a major argument. Just one of those emotionally exhausting circular conversations where both people leave feeling misunderstood. She had said, "I feel like I have to pretend not to need you or you pull away." At the time, he defended himself immediately. That's not true. But now he knew it was partially true. And the painful part was realizing she adapted herself around his fears more than he ever adapted around hers. That imbalance suddenly became impossible to ignore. He started recognizing how often she emotionally carried the relationship while simultaneously blaming herself for its instability. Meanwhile, he hid behind phrases that sounded mature, that were often just avoidance wearing calm language. "I just need space. I don't know what I feel. I've been overwhelmed lately." Again, those things weren't entirely lies. That's what makes emotional avoidance so confusing. The feelings are real. The overwhelm is real. The fear is real. But other people still bleed from the behavior those fears create. And he had spent so long focusing on his discomfort that he barely noticed the emotional loneliness growing inside her. Until now. Now it was all he could see. One afternoon, he found himself sitting in a parking lot rereading old texts again, a habit he swore he'd stop. He landed on a message she sent after he ignored her emotionally for almost 2 days following an anime weekend together. "I never know which version of you I'm going to get afterward." That sentence physically hurt to read now, because he remembered exactly what happened. They had spent days feeling deeply connected, laughing, touching constantly, talking honestly, falling asleep tangled together like people who actually trusted each other emotionally. Then afterward, he panicked internally, not consciously, not dramatically. His nervous system just shifted. Suddenly, he felt overstimulated, emotionally exposed, trapped by the depth of his own feelings. So he withdrew, answered slower, sounded flatter, created distance without fully realizing how abrupt it felt on her side. At the time, he told himself he was simply recharging. Now, he could finally see the emotional whiplash she experienced. Connection, distance, warmth, coldness, over and over. No wonder she became anxious. No wonder she eventually stopped trusting consistency from him. That realization forced him into another uncomfortable truth too. Part of him expected her to endlessly understand behavior he never fully explained. He wanted unconditional patience for emotional wounds he barely acknowledged himself. That's unfair. He sees that now. One evening, he accidentally opened a video she once sent him during a difficult week. Her face filled the screen immediately. No makeup, hair messy, talking softly because it was late. "I know you disappear when things feel intense," she had said carefully, "but I wish you'd stop acting like needing people is something shameful." He had forgotten about that video completely. Watching it now made his chest ache so sharply he had to pause it halfway through, because she understood him more deeply than he understood himself back then. And instead of letting that closeness soften him, he often treated it like exposure. That's the tragedy of emotionally avoidant people sometimes. The exact intimacy they crave becomes the thing that activates fear once they finally receive it. So, they sabotage connection while simultaneously mourning it. There were moments now where he genuinely didn't recognize the version of himself she experienced. Not because he was evil, not because he intentionally manipulated her, but because self-protection had become so automatic he rarely paused long enough to examine the damage it caused externally, until the relationship became quiet enough for reflection to catch up. And once it did, there was nowhere left to hide. One particularly bad night, he sat on the floor beside his bed staring at nothing while memories kept surfacing faster than he could emotionally process them. Her crying silently in the passenger seat while insisting she was fine. The way she stopped asking certain questions after he reacted defensively to many times. How relieved she looked during rare moments when he was emotionally open without retreating afterward. That last one shattered him, because she looked grateful for emotional consistency most people should never have to beg for. And somehow, he normalized that dynamic without realizing how unhealthy it became. He whispered something out loud accidentally while replaying those memories. "She loved me exhausted." The room stayed silent afterward, but the sentence lingered. Because that's exactly what happened. She kept loving him while slowly draining herself, emotionally trying to maintain closeness with someone terrified of fully resting inside intimacy. And now, he finally understood why she changed, why she became quieter, why her warmth shifted, why her hope slowly disappeared underneath self-protection. Not because she stopped loving him overnight, because she got tired of surviving emotional uncertainty every day. That realization created another painful contradiction inside him. Part of him wanted to reach out immediately, apologize, explain everything, finally tell the truth. Another part knew apologies arrive suspiciously late once someone stops chasing you emotionally. And honestly, he wasn't even sure whether reaching out now would help her or just relieve his own guilt. That question tortured him more than expected, because for the first time, he wasn't only thinking about his own fear. He was thinking about her experience too. Her exhaustion, her confusion, her loneliness inside the relationship. That shift in perspective changed him quietly. Not perfectly, not instantly. He still avoided sometimes, still overthought messages, still hesitated constantly. Growth is messier than people make it sound. Some nights he still convinced himself staying silent was safer. Other nights he almost called her just to hear her voice breathe on the other end again. But underneath all the confusion, one truth had become impossible to escape anymore. The version of him she loved was real. The version that cared deeply, that softened around her, that felt terrified because the connection mattered. That version existed. He just kept burying it underneath fear until she finally stopped waiting long enough to uncover it. And now, he was left sitting alone with the unbearable reality of seeing himself clearly. Right after the person who tried hardest to understand him emotionally had finally started letting go. At first, he thought he just missed the relationship. That's how he explained it to himself. Routine, comfort, familiarity. He told himself anyone would feel strange after losing someone they talked to every day. And honestly, part of that was true. But as the weeks kept passing, and her absence somehow became sharper instead of softer, he started realizing this went deeper than habit. Because habits fade, this didn't. If anything, the emotional weight of her became more precise over time. Less fantasy, more specific. He didn't miss some idealized version of love. He missed her. Her exact laugh, her exact timing, the way she said okay differently depending on whether she was calm, annoyed, hurt, or pretending not to be hurt. He even missed things that used to overwhelm him. That confused him the most. He missed her asking too many questions, missed the way she wanted emotional clarity constantly, missed the way she noticed every shift in him before he even understood it himself. Back then, those things sometimes made him feel emotionally crowded. Now silence felt worse. One night, he was driving home late when it started raining unexpectedly. And without thinking, he reached for his phone to call her. Not because of an emergency, because she loved rain at night. That was literally the thought. She'd like this. His hand froze halfway to the phone, then slowly dropped back onto the steering wheel. And suddenly, this crushing sadness hit him so hard he had to pull into an empty parking lot for a minute, because his body still moved toward her emotionally before his mind remembered she wasn't really there anymore. That's when he realized attachment lives inside muscle memory too. Not just thoughts. There were hundreds of little unconscious habits connected to her, sending her pictures of random things during the day, mentally saving stories to tell her later, reaching for her side of the bed half asleep, checking his phone whenever something emotionally difficult happened, because some part of him still associated her with comfort. And the horrible irony was, he only fully recognized how emotionally integrated she had become in his life after he lost access to her naturally. That realization made him rethink everything, especially his old belief that distance meant freedom. Because now he had all the space he once claimed to need, and somehow felt more emotionally trapped than ever. Trapped inside memory, inside regret, inside unfinished conversations. One Sunday afternoon, he tried forcing himself to move on properly, cleaned his apartment, deleted old screenshots, removed a few photos from his phone. Very mature, very controlled. until he accidentally opened a video of her laughing in the middle of deleting things. And immediately all the emotional composure disappeared. He sat there replaying the same 10-second clip over and over like an idiot. Not because anything profound happened in it. She was literally laughing because he burned toast. That was it. But the sound of her laughing felt so alive and familiar that his chest physically hurt afterward. It's strange how grief works. Sometimes you survive the big loss itself, then get emotionally destroyed 3 weeks later by someone's laugh. He started understanding something uncomfortable too. He had spent a lot of the relationship emotionally resisting how much he needed her. Not because she demanded dependency, because dependency scared him. There's a certain kind of man who thinks emotional self-sufficiency is maturity, who prides himself on not needing anyone too much, until someone finally reaches the parts of him that have been emotionally numb for years. Then suddenly needing someone feels both beautiful and humiliating at the same time. That was his real conflict all along. Not lack of love, fear of surrender, fear that loving someone deeply would eventually expose how emotionally fragile he actually was underneath all the calmness. So he controlled closeness through distance, pulled away first, stayed emotionally vague, maintained exits. But now there was no control left, because she emotionally released him before he emotionally released her. That imbalance tormented him quietly, especially at night. Nights became the hardest part lately. During the day, he could still perform normalcy well enough. Answer emails, go to the gym, talk to people, smile when appropriate. But nighttime stripped all the distractions away, and without noise, his real feelings became unavoidable. He started having imaginary conversations with her constantly, not romantic fantasy conversations, messier ones. I did care. I know. No, I mean really care. Then why did you keep leaving emotionally? I don't fully know. That question lingered in him constantly now. Why did he keep retreating from something he secretly wanted so badly? The answer wasn't simple anymore. Part fear, part conditioning, part emotional immaturity, part shame, and part of him genuinely didn't know how to receive consistent love without eventually distrusting it. That realization made him incredibly sad, because she spent so much time trying to prove her love was safe, while he kept reacting to closeness like danger anyway. One evening, he found himself rereading a message she sent near the end of the relationship. You make me feel deeply loved and deeply lonely at the same time. At the time, he hated reading that. It felt unfair, exaggerated, too heavy. Now it felt painfully accurate, because he did love her in all the ways he knew how. The problem was, the ways he knew how were emotionally incomplete, and love that cannot sustain emotional safety eventually exhausts the person receiving it. That truth settled deeper into him every day now, especially when he realized how hard she fought to understand him before finally giving up trying. She defended him constantly, even to herself. He's just overwhelmed. He struggles emotionally. He cares, he's just scared. And the tragic thing, she was right. But understanding someone's wounds doesn't stop those wounds from hurting you. Eventually, compassion becomes exhaustion if nothing changes. He sees that clearly now. One night around 2 a.m., he opened their old messages again, something he promised himself not to do anymore. He scrolled all the way back toward the beginning this time, back before the confusion, before the emotional push and pull became chronic. And honestly, you could feel how hopeful she was, how open he was too, actually. That part surprised him. He forgot there was a version of himself that sounded emotionally fearless around her in the beginning. Playful, consistent, present, until intimacy deepened enough to activate all the fear underneath. That realization hurt in a different way, because it proved he wasn't incapable of closeness. He just didn't know how to sustain vulnerability once the relationship became emotionally significant. And now, he finally understood why he couldn't let her go. It wasn't just because he loved her. It was because she became emotionally tied to parts of himself he had spent years hiding from. Around her, he felt seen in ways that terrified him, needed in ways that softened him, emotionally exposed in ways that dismantled the detached identity he built for protection. She reached places inside him casual connection never touched. And once someone reaches those places, losing them doesn't feel clean. It feels disorienting, like walking around with part of your emotional language suddenly missing. That's why everything reminded him of her now. Not because she was perfect, because she became woven into his nervous system through repetition, intimacy, safety, conflict, memory, longing, disappointment, tenderness. Love leaves traces everywhere when it's real enough, even inside ordinary routines. Especially there. One morning, he realized he still slept on one side of the bed unconsciously, leaving space for her. That realization almost made him laugh. Not in a happy way. In that tired, emotionally defeated way people laugh when they catch themselves still attached after pretending they're coping fine. Jesus Christ, he muttered quietly to himself. Then lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling grief and affection and shame all tangled together. Because he finally understood something that would have terrified the old version of him. He didn't just miss being loved. He missed loving her, missed caring about her day, missed hearing her thoughts, missed being emotionally connected to another human being in that specific, intimate way only certain relationships create. And maybe the hardest truth of all, part of him had known her importance long before she left. He just kept trying to reduce the intensity of his feelings instead of trusting them. Now the feelings remained anyway, only heavier, lonelier, too late to express cleanly. That's the unbearable thing about emotional realization arriving after distance. Once someone stops waiting for your clarity, you're left holding truths you should have spoken while their heart was still open enough to safely receive them. At some point, the question stopped being, "Do I miss her?" That answer had already become painfully obvious. The real question became, would reaching out help or just reopen something she fought hard to survive? And honestly, that question tortured him more than the loneliness itself. Because for the first time, his feelings weren't the only thing in the room anymore. Now there was accountability too. Now there was the uncomfortable awareness that someone else had already carried the emotional consequences of his confusion for a very long time. That changes the way regret feels. It becomes quieter, heavier, less dramatic heartbreak, more moral exhaustion. He started drafting messages constantly, not intentionally. The words just kept forming in his head while he moved through ordinary life. At work, in traffic, half asleep at 1 a.m., standing in grocery store aisles staring at things without actually seeing them. I understand now. I'm sorry. You were right. I did love you. I was scared. Simple truths. But every version felt incomplete somehow. Because what do you even say after someone spent months begging for emotional consistency while you kept handing them emotional uncertainty instead? How do you suddenly become articulate after silence already did most of the damage? That contradiction paralyzed him. One night he actually called her, accidentally, or partially accidentally. He had opened their old conversation again, something he still did more often than he admitted to himself, and his thumb slipped while staring at her contact photo. The phone started ringing immediately. His entire body panicked. He hung up before the second ring, then sat there frozen, heart racing, chest tight, staring at the screen like it had exposed something humiliating. 30 seconds later, she texted, "Everything okay?" That message emotionally wrecked him more than it should have, because despite everything, she still answered gently. No anger, no coldness, just concern. And suddenly he became terrified of replying, not because he didn't want to talk to her, because now the moment was real. This wasn't fantasy anymore. Not imaginary conversations in the shower, not late-night rehearsals inside his head. She was actually there, emotionally reachable, and he realized something uncomfortable immediately. Part of him preferred longing over vulnerability, because longing didn't require action. Action could lead to rejection, or worse, clarity. What if she doesn't want this anymore? What if she does? That second question scared him too, because if she still loved him, then he would have to decide whether he was truly capable of becoming emotionally different or merely emotionally regretful. And those are not the same thing. He stared at her text for almost an hour, then finally replied, "Yeah, sorry, accident," even sending that made him feel hollow afterward, because it wasn't fully true. Nothing about his attachment to her felt accidental anymore. A few minutes later, she replied, "No worries." That was it. Conversation over. And somehow the simplicity of her response hurt worse than rejection would have, because there was calmness in it. Not emotional desperation, not visible hope, just emotional steadiness. She wasn't chasing the conversation anymore. That realization sat heavily inside him all night. He barely slept, kept replaying the interaction repeatedly. "You should have said more." Like what? The truth. Too late. That phrase kept echoing through him lately. Too late. Too late to explain. Too late to clarify. Too late to suddenly become emotionally available to someone already adapted to your absence. There's a specific grief that comes from realizing you became emotionally honest only after losing the environment that once made honesty possible. And he could feel himself standing directly inside that grief now. One afternoon, he saw a couple arguing quietly in a parking lot. Nothing dramatic, just tension. The woman looked exhausted. The man looked defensive. And suddenly, he had this horrible flash of recognition, because he realized how many times she probably tried to communicate pain calmly before finally emotionally shutting down. He used to interpret her emotional reactions as intensity. Now, he saw the loneliness underneath them. That perspective shift changed everything. It even changed the way he remembered their intimacy. At first, he mostly missed her warmth, her presence, her attention. Now, he missed her trust, missed the way she used to look at him before uncertainty entered the relationship fully. There's something devastating about remembering how openly someone once loved you before your inconsistency taught them caution. That memory followed him everywhere now. One night, he found himself sitting in his parked car outside her apartment building. Not intentionally creepy, not planned. He had been driving around after work thinking too much and somehow ended up there automatically. The lights in her apartment were on, and for a second his entire body reacted instinctively. Heart racing, hands tightening round the steering wheel. Part of him wanted to go upstairs immediately, knock on the door, tell her everything. Finally stop hiding behind distance and pride and vague emotionally detached language. But another part of him stayed frozen. Because what if she opened the door differently now? What if she looked at him with kindness instead of longing? That possibility terrified him more than anger ever could. Because anger still contains emotional investment. Kindness after detachment feels final. So he sat there for almost 20 minutes doing absolutely nothing, just staring at the building while old memories moved through him in fragments. Her laughing in the hallway, her curl against him half asleep, her standing in his kitchen wearing one of his hoodies, her crying quietly while trying to explain why his emotional inconsistency hurt her, all of it existing simultaneously. Love, fear, tenderness, damage. Human relationships are messy like that. Not clean villains and victims. Just two nervous systems colliding with different capacities for intimacy. Eventually, he drove away without going upstairs. And honestly, part of him hated himself for that. Because even now, even after all the realization and regret, his instinct under emotional pressure was still retreat. That truth humbled him deeply. Growth wasn't happening as cleanly as he wanted it to. He still avoided, still hesitated, still had inside silence sometimes. The difference now was that he could finally see himself doing it, which almost made it worse. One evening she posted something simple online. Just a photo of coffee and a book with the caption, "Learning to enjoy quiet again." Most people would scroll past something like that instantly. He stared at it for 10 minutes because he knew what her quiet used to sound like. Back then it was anxious, waiting, heavy. Now it sounded peaceful. And suddenly he understood something that broke his heart a little. She had built emotional safety for herself in his absence. That's what he was really grieving. Not just losing her attention, losing access to the version of her that once emotionally reached for him instinctively. That version may never fully exist again, especially not with him. That realization forced another uncomfortable question into the open. Did he actually want to reconnect because he loved her, or because he couldn't tolerate being emotionally forgotten? He wrestled with that question honestly for the first time. Because ego and love often get tangled together after loss. Missing someone doesn't automatically mean you're ready to love them correctly. That truth mattered. And somewhere deep down, he knew she deserved more than emotional panic disguised as revelation. She deserved consistency, safety, presence, things he only started learning the value of after she stopped offering them freely. One night around 3 a.m., he finally admitted something to himself out loud. "If I reach out now, I can't be halfway anymore." The sentence sat heavily in the dark, because halfway was how he loved for most of his life. Half open, half vulnerable, half committed emotionally, close enough to feel connection, distant enough to preserve escape. But real intimacy doesn't survive permanently inside half measures. Eventually, someone breaks from carrying the emotional imbalance. And she finally did. Now, he sat alone inside the aftermath trying to determine whether his realization came from genuine growth, or simply from finally experiencing the loneliness she carried all along. Maybe both. That ambiguity haunted him, because human emotions are rarely pure. Love mixes with fear. Regret mixes with ego. Longing mixes with guilt. And somewhere inside all that emotional noise, he still couldn't fully tell whether reaching for her again would heal something, or simply interrupt the peace she fought painfully hard to build without him. In the end, the hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of himself that only existed when she loved him openly. That's the truth he kept circling round for months without fully admitting. Because she didn't just make him feel wanted. She made him feel emotionally visible. And for someone who spent most of his life hiding behind detachment, humor, independence, and carefully controlled emotional distance, being truly seen changed him more than he realized at the time. That's why her absence felt so disorienting now. Not because he couldn't survive without her. He could. People survive heartbreak all the time. They go to work, answer emails, buy groceries, laugh at things, keep functioning. Survival is not the same thing as emotional wholeness. And somewhere along the way, he finally had to admit that the relationship mattered more than his pride allowed him to say out loud. Even now, especially now. One night he sat alone in his apartment with all the lights off except the stove light above the kitchen counter. Couldn't sleep again. Lately sleep had become strange. Either he slept too hard out of emotional exhaustion, or his brain replayed memories until sunrise. No middle ground. That night he kept thinking about the final months of the relationship. Not idealizing them. Not romanticizing. Actually looking at them honestly for once. And honestly, they were both hurting by the end. That mattered too. Because somewhere in all his regret, he started accidentally turning her into perfection and himself into destruction. But real relationships are more complicated than that. She was imperfect. Sometimes she overanalyzed. Sometimes she pushed conversations when he emotionally shut down. Sometimes her fear of losing him made her cling tighter right when he was already internally overwhelmed. But the deeper truth remained. She kept trying to emotionally stay inside the relationship, while he kept emotionally stepping outside of it whenever intimacy became too intense. That imbalance slowly destroyed them. And now, he finally understood something uncomfortable. His avoidance wasn't protecting him from pain. It was creating it. For both of them. That realization sounds obvious when spoken aloud. But emotionally, it took him forever to absorb. Because emotionally avoidant people often confuse emotional suppression with emotional control. He genuinely thought distancing himself made him safer, stronger, less dependent. Meanwhile, the feelings never disappeared. They just leaked out sideways, into silence, into confusion, into delayed regret, into obsessive thoughts after the relationship finally became quiet enough for him to hear himself clearly. One memory kept resurfacing lately. Toward the end of the relationship, she once asked him, "Do you even realize I'm slowly giving up?" At the time, he answered too quickly, "You're being dramatic." God, that sentence haunted him now. Because she wasn't being dramatic. She was warning him. And he dismissed it because emotionally acknowledging her exhaustion would have forced him to acknowledge his role in causing it. So instead, he minimized it. That's another ugly human truth. Sometimes people invalidate pain because they cannot emotionally tolerate the guilt of understanding it fully. Now, the guilt existed anyway, only heavier. Too late to be useful. He got up from the couch that night and started pacing his apartment barefoot. Another habit lately. Movement helped when emotions got too loud. He opened the fridge, closed it, checked his phone, put it down again. Everything inside him felt restless. Not just because he missed her, because he finally stopped being able to hide from himself. That's what this whole experience really became in the end. Not some beautiful transformation, not some poetic realization, just brutal self-confrontation. He started seeing all the ways fear quietly controlled his relationships. How quickly he retreated after emotional closeness. How instinctively he reached for distance once someone mattered deeply. How often he waited for certainty before offering vulnerability. Even though intimacy doesn't work that way. You don't receive emotional safety first and then risk honesty later. The honesty is the risk. She understood that before he did. One morning, he found himself rereading the note she once left in his apartment after they spent a weekend together. He had almost thrown it away months ago without thinking. Now he read it like scripture. Not because the words were profound. Actually, the note was painfully ordinary. "Thank you for letting me in a little more this weekend." That line destroyed him. because she considered small moments of emotional openness from him meaningful enough to thank him for. And instead of recognizing how carefully she handled his heart, he kept focusing on how overwhelmed intimacy made him feel. The imbalance in emotional labor became impossible to ignore now. She spent so much time trying to make the relationship emotionally survivable for him. Meanwhile, he rarely asked whether it was emotionally survivable for her. That realization broke something open inside him permanently. One evening, he finally did something he'd been avoiding for months. He stopped reading the relationship like a mystery he needed to solve and admitted the simpler truth underneath everything. He loved her. Not hypothetically, not eventually, not only after she left. Back then too, during the confusion, during the distance, during the moments he pulled away afterward. The love was there, immature sometimes, fearful, contradictory, but real. And somehow, that realization made him cry harder than the breakup itself ever did. Because now, he understood how tragic it is when two people genuinely love each other, but only one of them knows how to remain emotionally present inside love consistently. He sat on the floor beside his bed for a long time that night, trying to regulate his breathing. Feeling ridiculous. Feeling human. There's something deeply humbling about finally admitting you were not emotionally ready for the very thing you secretly wanted most. And maybe that's the saddest part of all this. Not that he lost her, that he met real intimacy before developing the emotional tools required to hold it properly. Some people experience that once and never fully recover from the timing of it. He started wondering whether she still thought about him too. Not romantically necessarily, just at all. Did certain songs still remind her of him? Did she still instinctively reach for her phone sometimes before remembering? Did she ever lie awake replaying conversations wondering what could have happened if he had been less afraid? Or had she finally emotionally moved beyond all of it? That question hurt differently now. Because earlier in the breakup, he mostly feared replacement. Now he feared irrelevance. The idea that someone who once loved him deeply might someday remember him only faintly. That terrified him in a way he couldn't fully explain. One late afternoon, he almost sent her a message again. Not a dramatic confession. Not some manipulative emotional speech. Just honesty. Simple honesty. I understand now why you got tired. He stared at the message for a very long time, then deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, because he finally understood something else too. Not every realization deserves immediate access back into someone's life. That was a difficult truth. Growth does not automatically erase impact. Regret does not automatically restore trust. Awareness does not undo emotional damage. Sometimes the most loving thing a person can do after causing emotional instability is stop demanding emotional access while they figure themselves out honestly. That realization felt strangely mature and deeply lonely, because for the first time, he wasn't romanticizing reunion as the solution to his pain. He was finally confronting the deeper issue underneath everything. He needed to become someone capable of staying emotionally present without running every time love stopped feeling safe and started feeling real. And nobody else could do that work for him. Not her. Not another relationship. Not time alone. Him. That truth sat quietly inside him now. Heavy. Unresolved. Human. Some nights he still missed her so intensely it physically hurt. Some mornings he woke up angry at himself all over again. Some days he convinced himself maybe it was better this way. That maybe losing her was the consequence required to finally force emotional honesty out of him. Other days he hated that idea because it sounded too neat for something that caused this much real hurt. The truth is probably messier than that. Maybe she changed him. Maybe he hurt her. Maybe both people loved each other imperfectly. Maybe timing matters more than people admit. Maybe fear ruins things long before love disappears. Maybe some people only understand the depth of connection after the other person finally stops reaching for them. And maybe that realization never fully leaves them afterward. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a voice in the back of the mind during ordinary moments, like grief hidden inside muscle memory, like opening your phone to tell someone something before remembering the version of them who waited for you emotionally doesn't exist anymore.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.